the home office for many of us. So different perspective to organize this, but happy to have you on board. You will speak on behalf of your own experience. Norway is, as we all know, one of the leaders on European content in e-mobility, high numbers, high sales rates, but we still see some gaps or hurdles to take.
Yes.
Go ahead, share your knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll share my screen just a second. There we are. Can you see my slides?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so
maybe just go in presentation mode.
Yeah, just a second. Here we are. Okay, so I'm happy to speak to you and a little bit updates on Norway. I think many of you probably know a lot already. First, a little bit about the Norwegian Electric Vehicle Association. We are now currently more than 80,000 members, EV drivers from all over Norway, 35 employees. We're an NGO and we work to electrify transport as fast as possible. That's our goal. So some updated numbers first. We are currently at the end of October at a market share for fully electric vehicles, EVs. It's 52% so far this year. Plug-in hybrids, 20%. So together 72%, and that's for passenger cars. But if you look at light commercial vehicles, only 7% of those are of the sales so far this year are full electric. However, it's increasing. Last month has been higher. So this is one of the challenges when it comes to light commercial vehicles. But I think it has a little bit to do with still a little bit of a lack of choices in that segment. What is really interesting now, currently we now have reached, we're close to 330,000 fully electric passenger cars on the road at the moment, and about 136,000 plug-in hybrids. What is really interesting to see now is that, yeah, we have had pretty high sales for some years, as you can see in this slides, but still, as you all know, it takes a long time to change the total fleet. Now, in Norway, in total, 11.5% of all cars on the road, all passenger cars, are fully electric. And in some cities like Oslo, like Bergen, it's about 20%. So we're starting to get a good penetration now as well, and that has an effect, obviously, and the effect that we are hoping to see. And that is that if you look at the sales of fuels, that much hasn't happened. But if we just look at the 3 last years, we're seeing a drop. So if we compare these numbers are before Corona, because of course that has an effect as well. But if we compare January 2017 with January 2020, the sales of diesel and petrol is down with almost 10%. And this is to a large extent due to electrification. It also has something to do with more sales of biofuels as well. But still, we are starting to see the drop of the sales, and it's of course has a really good effect on it. This has an effect on CO2 emissions, which is the goal, obviously. Okay, so what about 2025? You probably heard that Norway has a goal of only selling fully electric cars from 2025, which is a bit more than 4 years from now. So how are we doing? If we look at the historic market share, as I said, it's already now 52%. This is a bit lower than we expected this year. Due to COVID, we've seen a delay in the launch of new car models, and especially the first half year, the sales were lower. Now, however, the last 2 months, the market share has been above 60%. Both September and October saw really good sales. And that has, of course, a lot to do with new models being launched, like the Polestar 2 and the Volkswagen ID3, for example. So above 60%, and in the city of Oslo, for example, last month, the market share for passenger cars, full electric, were above 80% last month. So it's really starting to roll. And looking forward, this is absolutely something, in my opinion, that we can reach. We can reach 100% in 2025. It's taken about 8 years to get from 3% in 2012 to 52%. There's a good reason for this to go faster going forward, with the development that we've seen with cars, charging stations, etc. But what are the hurdles? I was asked to talk about the hurdles as well. I just wanted to start off with this video. So this is my colleague Ståle last summer in Norway, driving more than 2,000 kilometers with his car and a camping wagon. And in many ways, you could say that maybe there are no hurdles anymore when you can do that with an electric car. But still, 1 out of 2 so far this year hasn't chosen an electric. Sorry, I'm starting it again. How do I get forward now? Okay, let's see. I have to escape, I think. For some reason. Here we are. For some, yeah. So still, there's a lot of people that does not choose an electric car when they buy a new car. First, we have to convince the people, right? How do we get people to become EV drivers? And I thought I'd share some numbers from a survey that we do with a research institute here in Norway every year, but it's done on a Nordic level. So it's called the EV Barometer. It's done January this year, and this is the Nordic countries in total. So if you ask people, this is a general public survey. If you ask them, the next time you buy a car, either new or secondhand, what would you most likely choose? You see that the secondhand petrol car is the most most clicked option. However, don't know and don't have a car and don't have a plan to buy one is pretty big as well, high numbers as well. So this might look a bit bleak. You see that the fully electric new car is on 9%, and an electric second-hand car is at 4%. What is interesting though, if we look at, we've done this survey for 3 years. So looking back, we see that it's really the development is quite interesting to see how more and more people are interested in buying an electric car on the Nordic level. So we look at the second-hand petrol car has gone from 23% to 16% in only 3 years, which is pretty impressive and gives me hope. So if you look at the different countries, it's obviously also a big difference. If you look at the right-hand side, you see the electric cars, and the dark blue is Norway. And Norway is, of course, a lot higher. Iceland as well is pretty high. But the reason between the differences here is, of course, that Norway and Iceland have quite good incentives for EVs. And so if you include both the new and the second-hand full electric car, these are the numbers in each country. Finland at 4%, Sweden at 6%, Denmark at 8%, Iceland at 19%, and Norway at 25%. But I think still, it's my main message here is, yes, it's not really good numbers. These are, however, not, here is also included the people that do not plan to buy a car. But the development is really, really strong and in the right direction. And EV drivers are happy. When we ask EV drivers how satisfied they are with being an EV driver, 94% say that they are satisfied or very satisfied. So it's all about getting the people into the car in the first place. What is also interesting from our own surveys that we do among EV drivers is this number. Today, 45% of EV drivers in Norway only have either 1 or 2 EVs in their household. And that has been a really strong development the last few years. So almost 1 out of 2 do completely without an ICE car. But what are the barriers then, if you look at the Nordic level? At the top, it's the price of the car. And then people are worried about the range, which is second. And number 3 is people are waiting. They're waiting to see how the technology develops. And we all know there's a lot of development in this area. So people are a little bit sitting on the fence a little bit. And then people are worried about the charging opportunities. So either they don't have charging opportunities at home or where they live, or after that, lack of charging opportunities on the road. Yeah, so that's the different reasons. But this also varies quite a lot between the Nordic countries. In Norway, the price too expensive is actually down at number 4. So it all has to do with making it possible for people to make the right choice. Charging. You all know that most of the charging is done at home, but people also need access to fast charging. I'm a bit more hopeful in this area now than I was a couple of years ago. A lot is happening in Norway at the moment, and currently we have more than 3,000 fast chargers around the country, and the network grows really quickly. We now currently have about 10 operators. More are investing, and they're investing quite a lot. And we are gone from a situation where you have maybe 1 or 2 fast chargers in one location to big stations with often 10, 20, 30, 40 fast chargers in one location, especially along the main highways. So currently we have about 106 or 107 EVs per fast charger. It's, yeah, the development has been really, really good. Of course, there are challenges in some areas, but now even in the very north of Norway, Finnmark, they're now planning and started building a network there. And it's been quite interesting to see how the sales has spurred in this area. I don't know if you know Finnmark County, but it's the size of Denmark, and it's only 80,000 people living there. It's the very north of Norway. And until recently, they didn't have any fast chargers. And last month, the market share in Finnmark County was 37.5, which is, I think is pretty incredible. And it's of course due to the fact that the people there now know that there will be fast chargers. One of the 2 big challenges from a user perspective when it comes to using fast chargers is this. People quite often experience that they do not work. From our last survey in April, 39% said that they have experienced this occasionally or more often. And I think that's not good enough. We have to make these systems more user-friendly. It might be user mistakes, but if there are that many user mistakes, then maybe something should be changed. We also get a lot of complaints about payment solutions. It's quite difficult for new EV drivers to understand and to find out how this works. So we receive, as we are a consumer organization organizing EV drivers, we get a lot of phone calls, emails, several thousand every month, and almost all of them, at least 80% is about charging. Another challenge is queuing. This is from April. I said it's become a lot better, and it is, but still people quite often experience queues at fast charging stations. And we had a challenge this summer because of COVID. A lot of people did their holiday in Norway and driving with their EV. So we had, of course, a record situation with queues this summer, and some really terrible examples of it. Still, however, we did a survey in August about vacations, holidays with their EV, and a lot of people still said, yes, there were queues, yes, we had problems, but we still loved to drive our EV around on a holiday. And it has also become better. This is, as I said, we have more stations, and it's from April 47%, down from 64% in 2019. Okay, so hurdles. You need to get people along and get them into the cars. You need to get the infrastructure up and running and follow the development in the sales, and that's crucial. With high sales going forward, we can't even stop to take a breath. We need to build more and more stations. And third, but not at least, it's very important to keep the policies in place long enough. In Norway, it is about keeping the incentives that we have. In other countries, maybe put new incentives in place. So I often say it as easy as this: we should tax what we don't want and promote what we want. And that is something that politicians has to be willing to do long enough. Just to show you how this works in Norway, we have with an ICE car 25% VAT purchase tax on top of that. This is just an example. As the full electric car is without VAT and without registration tax, this car today can compete. Although we have some challenges when we look into the leasing market. About half of new cars sold in Norway every year are leased or company cars, and in this area the EVs are not doing that well. So we need to solve the leasing market, unfortunately. So if we do that and keep the incentives long enough, I am sure that we will reach the 2025 target. Okay, I think that's on time, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. Very nice to get your insights from the Nordics. I saw a lot of snow on the picture. Is that a coincidence, or are you ready in the snow season?
I'm just getting ready for winter.
You're ready for winter. I saw topping three big hurdles, which is no factors, the price and the range. Also there we have forecast that we're looking to price parity between internal combustion engines and EVs by 2025. So that actually this should solve already itself in this fast-moving market.
Absolutely. However, I think that going from a low market share to 100% in just a year or two, it's not possible. It has to be a gradual transition because you need the infrastructure to follow. You need people's mentality to sort of change. So there has to be sort of like a development. And for Norway to sort of, for example, if we were to cut all the incentives today, that would have to say that we wouldn't reach the 2025 target. So we will have to have a gradual increase in the market shares for everything, the whole system, everything to sort of adopt and follow the development in a way. You can't go from 20% market share to 100% market share in a couple of years. That's not possible in any country, I think. However, other countries will see this development faster than what we've seen in Norway. As I said, we spent 8 years from 3% to 53%, 52% today. We did that with, pretty crappy cars, or at least a lot of cars with low range. I mean, I started at the EV Association 6 years ago. At that time, I couldn't even take my car, an EV, a first generation EV. I couldn't drive it an hour south of Oslo. There were no fast chargers on the main highway. Today, there are lots of them. So it has to be a gradual transition to a certain extent.
Good. One question that popped up. So we indeed could say 2025 stop of sales of new internal combustion engines. What are the expectations on the second-hand market? To expecting a lot of export from diesel and petrol cars, or what's the expectations on that side?
Nobody buys cars from Norway because we tax them so much in the first place. So there's no export of cars from Norway to other countries, really, because you won't get the money back. Yeah, so but I often get this question about secondhand cars. We're now definitely seeing an increase in the availability of EVs in the secondhand market as well, which is really important because most people obviously buy a car secondhand. 3 out of 4 of car buyers in Norway buy it secondhand. So this means that more and more people actually have the option of choosing electric, because we've had for some years now high sales when it comes to new sales. It's now starting to dribble down to the secondhand market.
And I have one more question before we go to our panel, and I'm quite sure that will be discussed in the panel discussion as well. Question from the audience: what payment solutions do we recommend for EU and the Nordics? It's indeed a challenge.
Yeah, you can ask why is it so difficult? I just don't understand it. You can go to a petrol station, you can pay with a credit card. You should be able to do that with an EV as well. Whether the credit card is on your phone or in any other technical solution, it doesn't matter, but you need to have a sort of like a credit card solution at the bottom. Today I'm asked, it's demanded of me as a consumer to have a customer relation with the different charging operators. I don't think that's the way going forward. As an EV driver, you should be able to drop by, pay with a credit card, and go on. And then, of course, open for roaming as well, because that is easy for people often, and especially when we get plug and charge, that's a good solution. But I think we should have both possibilities. There should be roaming, and there should be possible to pay with a credit card.
Good, thank you very much. Brings us to our panel. Christian, you stay a little while more if you have questions.
Yeah, a little bit, 10 minutes more I can stay here.
Good, thank you very much. So, brings us to our panel. Would like to welcome Hiep from the Dutch EV organization. Good to have insights from the Netherlands, because they are the top 1 country with offering public charging points. Brings us also to Alister Hamilton from EVA, EV user organization from Scotland. Then Donald Hopper from EV Assist, help desk for EV drivers. So many of us, same for me, already have probably hanging on the phone with his team. And at last, Quentin Ducreux, Lerebours, running the Chargeprice app, also seeing the challenges of pricing on the roads. So, short introduction from each of them. We can start with Ellen. Ellen, are you there? So far, not to hear, not to see. Now we can maybe move on to Donald. Donald, are you?
Yeah, Philip, I just wanted to tell you, I'm sorry, good morning from Rotterdam in the Netherlands.
Sorry.
You've sort of unstopped my video, so if you can just release that one, then it would be great.
Yeah.
Okay, this is perfect.
Sorry.
Hi, good morning to you. Good morning, Christina. So good to see you again. Thank you again for the update from the Norwegian. So very nice to be here, Philippe. Thank you so much. Do you want me to tell something about the situation in the Netherlands?
Yeah, you can give a short introduction, who you represent and how the Netherlands are doing today.
The Netherlands are doing well today. I'm a board member of the Dutch Electric Vehicle Drivers Association. We are a non-profit organization, and we started this in 2014 after a visit to Norway when we were so inspired by our Norwegian sister organization. So, and of course, you know, in the Netherlands, we also need the representation, the voice of the EV driver. We've got about 6,500 members and still counting. And we do three things. We do lobby a lot on regional level, national level, international level. We build a community. We want to have people involved. We've got a help desk to give them information. So those are the three things. And we also do a lot of research. So we've got two big researches going on. Last summer, we did our national research on charging, which gave some interesting outputs. And I think already, and I recognize something on the situation that is happening in Norway. And at this moment, we're working on the research on the EV driver. What personality does it have? What sort of behavior does it have? Does it respond to what sort of subsidies? To learn, we do this together with our government to learn on how we can approach the new EV drivers. And if you look, I'm sorry, I'm just continuing on. If you look at what we really want as EV drivers, we've got 6 points. And I think the first one is, we're a small country, so we need borderless charging and we need borderless payments as well. So those things should really be easy. And one of the other things that we really want, and it's getting more and more important, it's the second-hand market. I think, every EV driver should have the ability to have a good look on what the state of the battery is. So I think we should, invest in that one as well. And the other thing we really need is, if you look at information about charging infrastructure, it's important to have all those fast charges on the European roads, but it is also about information, because last summer we had some problems in France, and there was big discussions on our fields to say, get the information right. If the things are not working, get it right, because otherwise, if you place it, it's not worth if you don't give the good information. And last but not least, we think it's also important to talk about data, privacy of EV drivers. And I think we also should have some concern on that if you talk about the European level. And that's where I stop it, Philippe.
Thank you. We can go directly to Alister, also a head on EV user organization.
Thank you, Philippe. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so my name is Alister Hamilton. I'm the chair of AVERE Scotland. So very much like Christina and Ellen, we've been around for a little while. We date back to 2011, when 7 original members joined together to form the association. Since then, we've moved forward and we've strived to be the voice of the electrification of transport in Scotland. And in doing that, we became formally constituted, and we're now a not-for-profit community interest company. And we're growing quite rapidly in terms of membership and income. So these are the things we used to do. We used to promote quite widely around about Scotland and abroad. So individually and as a board of directors, some of whom are featured here and some of who are known in the community. For example, Eleanor Chalmers is quite well known on social media, for example. So we do everything from the individual promotion at charge points through to conferences like this one to promote the electrification of transport in general. We fit in with Scottish Government targets, which I think are worth mentioning. So they are for the generation of renewable electricity, 2020, for generating the equivalent of 100% of Scotland's demand from renewables. So I can tell you this morning, for example, that I'm charging my car and the CO2 emissions where I am are 2 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, which is very low. And in the north of Scotland, it's actually 0 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour at the moment. So there are other targets like phasing out the need for new petrol or diesel vehicles in the public sector by 2025 and 2032 for the phase out for the need for all new petrol, diesel cars and vans in Scotland. There are also targets for decarbonising Scotland's railways by 2035 and to make the Highlands and Islands the world's first net zero aviation region by 2040. all on the way to net zero carbon emissions by 2045. If you look at Scotland's energy resource base, then we've got 25% of the European wind resource, and I can tell you this morning it's been quite windy here, and that's what's giving us the low carbon emissions in our energy supply at the moment. We also have 25% of the European tidal energy resource, and tidal energy comes into our electricity mix from the north of Scotland. We've got 10% of the European wave energy resource, and a renewable electricity generating capacity of around 60 gigawatts, which is 10 times, more than 10 times existing peak domestic demand. So Scotland is going to be an enormous exporter of renewable electricity. We also have about 1.2% of the world oil production and about 2% of the world natural gas production based on last year's figures. And of course, we've got highly educated workforce and world-leading universities. And I would say that there's a guy called Andrew Gordon, who was a physicist and a monk, who developed the world's first electric motor. And Robert Anderson, another Scot, developed the first electric carriage. And we all know about James Watt and his contribution to steam power. And we all use kilowatts and kilowatt hours, which are named after him, another Scot. And of course, it was James Clerk Maxwell who introduced the world to the theory of electromagnetics and all that stems from that. So Scotland is a small country, but with a big influence and ambition in the world.
Thank you, Alister. Quentin, you can go as next. You have a different point of view.
Yeah, I suppose.
Different background, not a different point of view, a different background.
Yes, exactly. So, so we founded Chargeprice with the associates basically because we were EV drivers, like many people here, I suppose. And so what we do, just so that you understand the background as well. So my personal background is that, excuse me, I'll start from the beginning. My personal background is that I used to work for an EMP, so a charging card provider. Then now I work as well with a charge point operator in the south of France. And now we also founded with associates Chargeprice, which is basically a bit of a combination of both, which allows users to find the best charging price when they want to charge. But behind this slogan, what we also do is that we explain how you can charge, basically which card will work where. So this is the background we have, and just like to explain a little bit what's the, let's say, the problems we noticed for, let's say, massive adoption here is that, so for our users, they come on the website and the main question is like, it's 40% newcomers. So when I say newcomers, it's people who just bought their EVs, or maybe they did not even receive their EV. So, they're still looking at how it works, how they can charge, etc. And their questions and the first search are clear. Basically, basically, how should I charge? So usually they know you need a certain card, a certain charging card, or a certain app. Which one should I use? So that's their main question. And as they charge a couple of times, then the main question comes, and then I answer to Ellen also. Sorry, to Christina, excuse me, apologies. That the payment solution is actually a problem. So it's not the problem itself, but is that the information to which payment solution you can use. So for instance, now I would say 95% of the networks offer somehow almost ad hoc solution. So you can charge almost in a few seconds. You can register to a certain, let's say, EMP, so to a certain app, and start charging even if you didn't plan anything before. The issue is maybe it's going to be more expensive. Usually, yes, if you didn't check before. So this is the problem we try to tackle, obviously, but it's still not so nice not to know before being in front of the station and asking, and basically you know how you can pay once you face the problem. And so this issue is linked to the structure of the market, obviously. But I think for me, whether we pay with credit card or not, or via an app, etc., is not so much the problem. The problem is the access to the information. what you need to use. So there's also, obviously, I'm not discussing the major problem we face also, which is you see a certain price, then you charge and you pay a different price, which is like illegal in the first place, and in most of the countries, and also very, very disappointing as a user. So also, so to go on with information, and Ellen mentioned this as well, that again, like I have an anecdote, for instance. As I work also with electric 55 charging, this charge point operator, during the last weeks, we installed new stations in the city. And it was extremely funny that we have on these particular stations, it's in Paris, there's a screen. And on this screen, which we could do what we want with it, we just displayed all the charging cards or charging apps, which are welcome to charge on the network. So it's like 70 or so. So we just display a certain amount actually. And so this actually explaining how many operators, it was like, let's say a commercial USP. We wanted to say, okay, we have so many operators working on our network, but then actually it led to more questions. So indeed, the premise that people who bought a car literally don't know how it works. And to finish this anecdote actually is that I even had someone who came to charge while I was like on the station. We were actually checking if the station was properly installed, etc. Someone came and parked with her EV next to the station without plugging it in, but still paid for the parking, even though parking was free if you're charging. So indeed, for me, the main issue is anyway, in terms of mass adoption, is the information actually. So when you buy your car, you should know. Just like it's not that complicated. It's just that we don't know how it works.
Thank you, Quentin. And this brings us with Donald. Donald, you can introduce yourself. I think a lot of people come with questions at your office.
That's right. Yes. So my name is Donald. I'm co-founder and CEO at AVERE Global, the leading provider of managed services to the e-mobility industry. So we offer anything from first and second line customer and technical support to charge point operators, network owners, OEMs, and charger manufacturers. All the way down to actually infrastructure monitoring, so infrastructure management, making sure that those chargers are actually working, maximizing uptime and availability. And I suppose, making sure that they're well maintained and we have a field service that can go on site when anything is wrong with the actual charger. Actually, at AVERE, we are now close to 70 members of our CX team who field probably about anywhere between, at the moment, 15 and 20,000 interactions, calls a month. This happens across 24 countries and I suppose across a combined network of about 40,000 charging locations. So it is a myriad calls and I suppose different scenarios that are described either on the phone or in an email. And I suppose I wouldn't dare to say we've heard it all, but yeah, there are very interesting sort of stories at the charge point. I think what's interesting is that out of 71% of our calls have to do with people who are actually at the charging point. The rest, of course, is mostly around planning. Actually, that education piece is quite important because we do have calls from people at the actual dealership when they're looking at buying the car and perhaps they're not getting the support that they thought they would at on location. And they feel like they want to do a test drive, for example, so they'll turn up at the nearest charging point without really knowing how to do it. And actually, the test car, the test vehicle doesn't even have, in the case of AC charging, a cable included in the boot, in the trunk. But for sure, pricing and transparency, right, is number one issue of I suppose complaint or grief. And it's almost like a question of principle. So with Christina, I would agree that to have ad hoc in the form of a payment card, credit debit card that you can use at the charging point is something that if you don't have it, it almost feels like drivers do not want to use it. And it doesn't mean that and I don't think it's because they just want to use a card. I think it's about the principle of it, not having to sort of join different mobility service providers to be able to access one single charge point. And I think Quentin, you had I mean, in the app you can see how you're using one charging point, and you can be paying anything from €7 to €35 depending on which charging card you're using, right? Or which MSP you're actually subscribed to. So I think I feel like we're confronted with a question, which is, if you had that green button and you could just press it and everything would be electric suddenly, would you actually press it? And I think we're in the point where I would perhaps not press it yet, simply because there's this element of trust that we're trying to build, I think, as an industry, with between the driver and a new sort of technology. And I think until we don't have the right number of chargers, but number of chargers that are actually working, it's going to be an interesting ride that I'm sure we're all willing to sort of partake in.
Good, thank you. So we got a lot of already pain points that we heard from the speakers around here. So we indeed have now roughly about 1.3 million EVs on the road in Europe, and we want to go by 30 million. So we want to go 10 times higher in numbers. Are we also going to face 10 times of higher issues on these charging points? I heard from Christina, charging point not working, people questioning on the pricing, people are questioning how to pay. What should we address in the first place?
I think that responding to Quentin, what is the difference, I think, today with Norway and still most other European countries is that we are sort of past the early adopter stage, where geeks like us, we know, we understand, we have tried EVs. In Norway at the moment, with market shares of 50–60%, all kinds of people buy fully electric cars. And the people that call us are often the older people. We have people buying EVs without a smartphone, calling us, and we're trying to help them. How do you charge without a smartphone? And that's the issue. And today, with 10 different operators, you need to subscribe to all of them, get bills from all of them. It's not functioning in a good way from a consumer point of view. I understand that operators and commercial players want to have a customer relation, of course, because that's where they want to have you as a customer. But for me as a consumer, I don't care whether I charge here or there. I just want this to be easy. And we have tried to help this situation with launching an RFID tag that all our members get, and they can connect it to all the operators. They still have to connect it with all the operators in all different ways, and some of them is difficult. There's a lot of issues with this. So we receive about 6,000 requests a month from our members, and it's a lot to do with this, and especially new EV drivers, they don't have a clue. And me myself, I went driving Sunday, and 1.5 hours south of Oslo, had to fast charge each way because it was the first generation electric Golf. And at one new station, first, the RFID tag didn't work. Second, the app started the charging, but it stopped 3 times. So what was luckily was that now we have so many stations that I could actually go on and charge at the next one. But this is a situation that makes consumers and EV drivers insecure. They do not trust the system. And especially, this is helped today in Norway because we're getting more and more fast charging stations. But when you don't trust the system, you don't know if the charge is going to work, you don't know if there's a queue, and you do not understand the payment solutions, and they're difficult, then this has to be solved first. And I think that has to be done on a European level. So European Commission, the European politicians have to decide that we need as seamless solutions. People should be able to cross borders and access charging and pay with credit cards if that's what they want to do. But yes, of course, you can have roaming solutions and all of that as well. But you should have easy access and be able to drop in. Okay, so that was my last rant. I need to go now, and I was very happy to take part.
Thank you very much, Christina.
Goodbye.
Bye. Ellen.
Yes, I wanted to, because we've been able to roam from day one. We have, you know, we were fortunate in our country to have such a system. So we had all those providers having to work together and not being able to give clear transparency on prices and on availability. And I think what I agree, you need regulation. And I know that at least the Dutch government has said from July next year, 2021, all those providers are obliged to give all the information. So like, you know, you should really regulate that. And because we have had 10 years, you know, to sort it out in a way of discussing and understanding and letting all the technical people do their work. But I mean, it is like it's a starting market, and I think now it's time that governments say, well, you know, fix it, just make it right, and it's not just it's not a question, it's just regulation. So fix it before July 2021. And I think this is on a national level, and I think we should try to put that on a European level as well.
Could I maybe tell you a little bit about the experience in Scotland, where the government decided to put in a charging network. So there's something called Chargeprice Scotland. That's got about 1,500 chargers across Scotland. The nature of Scotland is that the population is in the central belt, but there's vast areas of, you know, country with very low population density. And the view was that everyone should be able to have access to electric vehicles and everyone should be able to charge. So those 1,500 chargers are under one access system at the moment. Obviously, there are other private networks in Scotland, and the Chargeprice Scotland network is moving towards contactless payment at the moment. And it's not a panacea, but it's one model that in the early stages gives some kind of sense of security about the network and traveling across the country.
Quentin, you wanted to say something?
Oh yeah, I think also something we need to keep in mind, which I dare to think I've seen from the inside, is the structure of the market is also very important. So it's changing. Let's say it's very interesting what you said, Ellen. So about the Netherlands, which was since the beginning, everyone was working together because there was a lot of private companies, or let's say simply people who founded companies also. Like there was a lot of spin-offs actually, and they said, okay, we are going to put a station on the street. People are going to charge, and we are going to make money from it, which sounds like a sound thing to do, which like a normal business thing, supply, demand. The problem in many other markets, which now is a problem, but back in the days was not, is the structure was heavily, the market itself was heavily subsidized, and so you had a lot of cities, a lot of let's say local authorities. So I'm thinking about France and Germany right now, actually, where let's say it was a city or a Stadtwerke or whatever, like let's say a public entity would say, okay, we can get subsidies, so we're going to put stations, and then they would go into schemes where there will be different prices, etc. They would also be, you know, it goes into the typical public market, let's say problems, which is a big corporate trying to squeeze as much money out of these subsidies via the city, etc. So why am I saying this? Is because back in the days, the revenue from charging was not important. It was marginal. So let's say you take a charging network installed in France, especially, or in Germany. I'm naming these countries because I know them best, but you know, the scope, the entire scope, the volume of money which was involved in installing these chargers and operating them. So a lot of it, let's say 95% of it, like I dropped numbers, but I'm sure I'm not mistaken, or it's not so far from reality, is that most of the money which was transferred was going from the subsidies to the cities to the big corporate operating these stations. So then the corporate, why would they bother to get 0.1% or 1% of this amount of money from the revenue from charging?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we lost you.
Yeah, okay, sorry, I think it dropped. Yeah. So therefore, the issue is that there was no interest for many players to actually make money from charging, which was different, I think, in the Netherlands. I mean, I'm obviously exaggerating, and I'm sure many people here would contradict me. But the fact is now, many cities also, or people who install chargers, public entities or not, realize that it costs money to operate. So now change is that I think it's good timing as well that there's more and more drivers. So more and more revenue. I mean, I'm sure there's no network yet which is like breaking even, you know, like tomorrow, but more and more people charge. So the company at the same time see that they can make a profit, and also that they have to provide a proper service in order to actually make a profit in the long run, so that, you know, so that people are happy to charge there and they don't get, let's say, punished like it happened by the authorities, like it happened in Germany not long ago for some companies. So basically, I think in at least France and Germany, the fact is now, I mean, I have good hopes that it will become better, because also when I talk to people from the industry, I realize more and more people actually want their stations to work properly so that they can bring revenue. And basically, to be a bit provocative, I would say still 1 year ago, a station which doesn't work, well, it's a station which is going to cost money anyways, because, you know, people, you know, you're going to fix it, so it costs you money, and then someone else is going to break it again. So, you know, you somehow would rather leave it unfixed. Right now, more and more, I would say, people in the industry see it as a station that is not bringing money anymore. So I think this is a very good, you know, change of mind. I mean, it's not super, it's very much business oriented, but I think slowly but surely we're going there. And also with the payment systems, I think that it should be seamless indeed, whatever it is. Like, you know, people should come at a station, should charge, full stop. That's it.
Thank you. Somehow it's actually worrying. We have all the solutions, we have the technology, but we cannot address them. So EV users don't manage to charge, or they have technical issues. EV operators want to bring them on the street and want to make the service available, have difficulties with people to connect or to maintenance them, to make them properly working. Yeah, if it's one of the questions that pops up in the Q&A. Donald, you mentioned 20,000 calls a month, if you're correct, for a base of how many chargers do you serve?
40,000.
Yeah, this is actually very worrying. Where is the gap? Are the EV users not committed enough to make it happening, or is it where is the issue? Is it a misunderstanding from the EV users? Is it a misunderstanding from the operators that they can understand what the end user actually wants?
No, I think it's understanding the customer journey, and I think we're not all customers are created equal, and I think we're not born knowing how new technology is going to be adopted. I think by providing that support and that level of assistance, together with you know, being able to educate the market in terms of not just the benefits of making the switch, but rather allowing them to compare it to what they will always. So we do this over. We're now doing it in 20 languages, right? 20 languages. It doesn't matter in which language it is. They will always compare it to the experience of refueling their previous car, which was an ICE, right, an internal combustion engine. So, you know, we have drivers calling saying, I never had to, you know, I would never turn up at a refueling at a fueling station and actually wonder if I was going to be able to refuel my car. That it just doesn't happen. And I think that's where we need to get to, right? A point where the comparison is no longer necessary. We can move on to the many advantages of having, you know, a connected sort of infrastructure that will allow for much more innovation in the form of energy management. And I feel, let's get the basics right. And I do think, you know, it's 20,000 calls. It is considerable, but I think we're all now simply invested, perhaps after the whole pandemic, to, as a society, really move forward and, you know, sort of make that change. And I think I don't feel it's a question of a blame. I think before, you know, somebody would decide to be a charge point operator, and maybe they didn't have the support and the help other than having to do stuff themselves. Now there's like an ecosystem available to them, so that even if charging is no longer your, or is not your sort of main service, you know, part of your core offering, you still feel comfortable doing it because you know that you have companies out there that can help you sort of augment your service by adding charging services.
So maybe you have to look at it from a different point of view. Actually, when you buy a car, you should actually have all the instructions how to charge your car. Is there where we fail on? Is it on the car dealership that they're not? It's time consuming, of course, that they don't give enough instructions to the people how to use the car. Is there where it starts?
I think so, Philippe. I think that's exactly where it starts. And I think the reason that associations like ours exist is not because we all just enjoy talking about electric vehicles. It's because there are problems in the system that we're trying to use. So one of the things we do as an association, given that there's a national Chargeprice Scotland network, is we go and knock on the door of the organisation, the government agency that runs that, and hold quarterly meetings with them in order to reflect the views of our members to the Transport Scotland who are delivering the service. And that can be quite a difficult meeting because we're often complaining about chargers that don't work, chargers that haven't worked for a long time, problems with payment, problems with the back office, problems in levels of service, all that kind of thing. So that helps improve the infrastructure at a sort of national level. But that needs to happen at a European level. So, and as you know, Philippe, you know, there are working groups within AVERE who are trying to achieve just that kind of thing in order that the infrastructure works appropriately across Europe.
Yeah, I think it's also a question that pops up, and it's also what we are aiming for with AVERE as organization. We compare it often with the phone market, where in the beginning, when you were traveling across Europe, that it would always be a surprise what roaming you had and how much it will cost. So we indeed ask on the EU policymakers to address this need, and if it doesn't come from the industry side or the operator side, maybe we have to ask the policymakers to address this need and say, this is how it will be. A contract, you know what's in that contract and what conditions you have, and end of question. Ellen, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, before I would also like to say something about the industry, because I know it is difficult, and you know, because from day one we had these roaming possibilities, and we see good companies trying to find business models in charging. And of course, you know, with all the smart charging concepts, I understand why it is difficult. So that is there to say that I don't think it is as easy maybe as the telephone market. I think it's something more complicated. Talking about education, what I notice is that, of course, the car dealers have got a problem. We've got 2 programs. We've got sort of a mystery guest research where we visit car dealers to see how well they know to inform, you know, consumers that are interested in an EV, not to punish them, but to help them. And we also have a sort of EV for dummies trainings that we use for car dealers as well, but also for people that just wanted to get into the car. But what you say, EV for dummies, why should you even follow a workshop on how to drive your car? So the next generation EV drivers will be much more, we cannot do that. But what we also see is that if you talk about it with governments, I think what we see in different countries now, if you look at subsidies and EV, incentives, all countries are going into different directions. In Germany, they're gearing up. In the Netherlands, they're downgrading it. So what I see as well is a sort of massive, not being well informed about what is going on. So I see it as a task from our EV Drivers Association. I think it's also a task from the industry to explain to everybody what is going on, because we had an election debate, I think 1.5 years ago, just before the European elections. And it was astounding how misinformed most of those people are. They have no clue and they only listen to headlines. And so there is also a need for us, I think, to inform people and not thinking, well, they know it, we know it, but we are living in a bubble. That's what I know. We are living in one electric bubble, and we should, you know, with electricians that talk about all sorts of technical details, but we need to get that other message across. So I think there is, you know, it's about information, about understanding the industry, but also about a sort of consistency with governments to say, well, what's going on in Germany? And let's, you know, at the Netherlands, for example, now we're downgrading our subsidies, which I think is just, you know, the wrong time to do. Why? Especially since, you know, we're like front runners in charging. I think we earn a lot of money on it. We organize a seminar tomorrow, a webinar tomorrow, on how to accelerate charging infrastructure with examples from California, Canada, Asian countries. It is like we need to inform people and step out of our bubble. I think that's also part of it.
So actually you should kind of do a hard reset of our brains. But, when you buy an electric vehicle, you don't buy a car anymore. You have to start from scratch and learn new habits, new contract which goes along. It's a battery on wheels. It's a smartphone on wheels, I sometimes hear saying. So it's a completely different aspect than we are used to be. Is that a kind of solution or way of thinking that we should go ahead? Anyone?
I feel like I think, you know, it is you're buying not just a computer on wheels, but you're buying a new device that can be used at a macro level. So I think you're right. But as a consumer, do I really connect with that? I'm not entirely sure. I think it is a change in behavior and therefore attitude and habit. I think in general, you know, when we speak with current EV drivers, they are happy. I think there can be frustration in terms of having certain issues at a charge point on certain days, but I think in general, it's about getting them in the car, like Christina said at the beginning. And once you're in the car, you kind of are able to mold, you know, your daily routine if needed. I think it's not. I don't think it's right, you know, at a dealership level. If you're a salesperson, your main driver is to close deals, right, and to sell cars. And I think if you're being sort of rewarded for selling ICEs because you'll be meeting your monthly quota, then of course you're not, and that's your main target, then you're not going to really bother with learning the intricacies of electric vehicles and where to charge them to the point where you don't even know what kind of cable you should be adding or including in the car when you're selling it, right? And I think we've been for way too long given too much leeway by people who really love the idea of electric cars and know more about them than most people, and we're not going to have that for much longer. And that element of trust is going to be key if we're going to make that switch rather quickly.
I think it's very interesting what you said, talking about the dealerships, and because people, we users we have, whether as HiePRactief or Chargeprice, they often complain. I'm sure you too. When you get support, they didn't tell me to do that. They didn't tell me how it works, etc. I mean, you sit in a car basically, which is derived from an industry which is massively under digitalized, like compared to what it could. You sit in a car, nothing tells you. Just like you download an app, you have a tutorial in a car, nothing of that. You have maybe a flyer in the glove box. I'm not so sure. You see what I mean? So, but it's very interesting what you said. We cannot count on them. I agree. Like, you cannot count on the car seller to very quickly explain you everything, how it's going to work, etc. But I mean, that's why there are services like yours or ours or everyone here, basically, I think. But it's very interesting. I recently went to I wanted to buy a new car, so I went to the car dealership, and there they were pretty good actually. But still, when you ask them, do you have any material, for instance, any marketing material, anything I can read, give me even just a website or something, they have nothing. They have absolutely nothing. It's not even the dealership itself, it's the actual car brand. I know it's slow to come. I mean, I work with many of them. Many really try to get things going, but I agree that this would solve many, many issues. It would also help people to be more, let's say, organized, complain in a more organized way, I would say, which would lead to the market. So the industry would get the feedback in a better way, I suppose, as well. And I mean, another anecdote, I like anecdotes. I noticed we've had people who were screaming at us over the phone recently because they could not charge, because the dealership basically gave them Type 3 cables with the new car, which they bought 2 months ago. Which is, like we have a love actually.
But what you see, I think what you see, we speak a lot with dealers as well. What you see is when they normally sell a car, it's just a car, and when it drives out, it's not their concern anymore. But with the electric car, there's also this circle around it, around charging, information, subsidies, and they don't, sometimes they don't think it's their responsibility to tell people about it. So I think a good, and what I'm very fortunate in the Netherlands now, and we also work together with them, they've set this system of car dealers that are really electricity friendly. They do trainings, and they train not only the technical personnel, but also their salespeople. And they've got this special brand that they put on the door, so that if you've got your electric car, you can go to those dealerships that are really good at electric cars. And I like that. It's like the industry that helps solving this problem as well.
Yeah. Can we expect some solution from coming up technology that we already know of, have seen with Tesla, is the charge and connect, or connect and charge? It's better explained that you just plug in the connector, and that's a data exchange that just say, okay, are you your car number X and I'm charge point number X? We just start to charge and run on the computer that you have.
Plug and charge, ISO 15118, that's all these things, I suppose, that you're thinking about.
Is that
I think
part
for
of the solution?
Oh yeah, there's also actually I think Charin was also working on this, obviously. The fact is, I think it shifts a bit the problem in a way that, I mean, obviously finding the right, not having to find the right card would be perfect also, like for sure. But the fact is, having the background I have, I'm a bit afraid, like we should not roll it out just right now. It should be absolutely seamless, otherwise it would be a massive disappointment that people would just plug, it would not work, and then everything would just go down. So that, but obviously I think it would be amazing that you could just like do like a Tesla. I mean, the first car I charged with a Model S, and indeed I was wondering why. I was working at Plug Surfing at the time, and I was wondering why we have these cars actually, because you just plug the car and it works.
I think Tesla are quite a good example of a company that don't have some of the problems we've just been discussing, because that's all they sell is electric vehicles, and they have this supercharger network across the world that people can, with a Tesla, can use. So it's a very interesting business model, and I guess all the incumbency are trying to shift over. You know, if you look at, for example, just take the Volkswagen Group, you know, shifting over to EVs. So one of the solutions, it's well, whether it's a solution or not is a good question. But one of the things the Scottish government are doing is to try and train dealerships. So there's a program of dealership training going on at the moment, and that's run by, again, another agency of government, which is the Energy Saving Trust. And what we see as an organisation is dealerships reaching out to us to help back that up effectively, because it's the relationship with the driver going forward, I think, is quite important. And whether that's something that the dealerships are prepared to take on or ready to take on is a good question.
Should that be part of the European Green Deal? We have heard the opening this morning. It's a value chain. We need to accelerate battery production. We need charging point operators. We need the automotive industry, also the energy supply. But there should be apparently also an education part, which is general. It's not only about the car dealers. It's the EV users. Do we need incentives to have a training program, which everyone wants to join it to follow it?
Well, I think we're just really all not old enough to remember when automobiles first came along 100 years ago. And what happened at that time was automobile associations formed. You know, for example, in the UK, the RAC and the AA, and of course, they are still going strong today. But now we're in this transition to a new way of fueling the vehicle, and that's really what you're getting at, Philippe. I think is ultimately the main problem is around the refueling of the vehicle, because it's different from what we've been accustomed to for the last 100 years or so. So it's a whole new set of experiences in charging an electric car, and the question is who's going to step into that space and say, okay, we're going to help the consumer in this regard.
Yes. Anyone else want to comment on this?
I think it's really great to still to educate, if I may say so. I mean, rather train the dealerships. Indeed, also I think there's also something. Maybe it's very operational, but I think many I talk to are afraid that, you know, if they sell an electric car, they don't have the same maintenance contracts, etc. Also, the offers are not very let's say as ripe as a typical leasing offer for a diesel or a benzene car. So the fact is, you know, when you buy a thermal engine car, you have specific plans. You know, they can be okay. They're gonna, I don't know, change the oil. They're gonna do this and that. Every year you have the detail, etc. With electric car, these offers simply don't exist. And as you were saying, Ellen, the whole ecosystem is not. Somehow, I think it's a bit lagging behind on the automotive sides, because they have so many opportunities to create offers, to create added value, to increase their margins, which they don't. And the actual dealership doesn't have this input from the headquarters. So he's thinking he's going to sell a car, he's going to go, and he's not going to make any money. And in the Netherlands, what's very interesting is that you have all these wholesalers. I don't have names actually in mind, but you know, they buy and they resell cars like huge numbers. And these actually is very interesting, because they know, even though the car just quickly, if not goes through their platforms, they seem to me, I mean, these are the people I talked to the most when I was working typically with Plug Surfing, and they wanted, you know, to provide solutions to tell people, yes, you can buy 20 of these electric cars. Here are the solutions. But again, because I think they realized they had a financial interest in that.
And I think I agree. It's the business model for car dealers is difficult with electric cars. And what I talk a lot to car dealers as well. And what you also can see is that some of the people that have to work on those cars, they are even a bit afraid of, repairing an electric car. So it's not all the technicians that really like this new revolution. And I think there's going to be a big shift in the car dealer market the next coming year. So we all know that, especially with the brand markets. What I was telling you about this brand of universal, educated car dealers. What they offer now, I just heard, and I really am interested in that they are able to do a battery check, and I think that is something that I thought would be, difficult. But what happens if you buy a secondhand car with them? They're able, or if you drive in with your car, they're able to do a check on what the status is of your battery, and I think that is an interesting development as well, because what I also think is that car dealers should be more creative in what sort of new business models will there be concerning energy, or concerning, I don't know what, concerning leasing, doing other things, with solars. And so I don't know, but there is going to be a big shift, and I think we need to help them instead of, point fingers and say they're doing it wrong.
Absolutely. The news is that the health of batteries is a concern of the European Commission, and they are indeed working on a system to address this understanding, to address the needs of the second-hand market, of course. So a question that pops up in the Q&A, there's still a difference of standards and plugs existing in the market. Tesla, Chalemo, CCS. I think, Donald, you can help with this. Do you think it's still a hurdle for the customers to understand this different of standards?
I think there's still...
Meanwhile, the industry has responded on this, certainly in Europe. But what's going on today? Still confusion?
It's definitely a topic, yes. I think there's still, and there will be more, I think, as it goes more and more mainstream, and you're moving from early adoption to mass market, and people will have less patience. I think we've of course had drivers calling in because they were trying to plug in a cable that wasn't really fitting in the socket. So there's videos going around, right? People trying to use the charger to actually fill in the air in their tires, right? Thinking that. So there's so much, I suppose, so much work to do on standardization. But I think, in the EU, it's always been about standardizing, right? It's the whole philosophy of the union. So I think I don't feel that's a big problem. I think it's more about, like Ellen said, reinventing business models. I think for car, if I go back to that, it's kind of like you have shared mobility, right? So you start to get mobility hubs. Maybe it's a chance to sort of have those charging hubs at dealerships, where you're no longer sort of focusing so much on the one-time sale, but on recurring revenue from, call it memberships to gain access to cars on a sort of recurring basis. And there's, I think we're in that curve where we're the ice pickers, and then you go on to actually becoming the ice factory, and then you go on to sort of creating the refrigerator, and maybe dealerships are on that place where they need to jump from one innovation curve to the next, and not just focus on what can we do better with what we currently do. It's what do we need to do differently, and that's the whole industry. Because that's what AVs are all about. I think AEC, ANWB, they've been servicing and helping with traditional cars. I think we're facing something completely different at the moment, and we can't go about it with the same sort of mentality that we have for the past 100 years, because it's no longer just a car. It just isn't. We do want to get from point A to point B. We have less people taking, driving tests, less inclined to having their driving license. I don't have a car, and I think a lot of people in my sort of circle don't have one either. We don't, you know, we can share, and I think that's what we're facing at the moment. It's such a macro level that maybe we really need to sort of go high up the tree to be able to see the whole forest, right? And I think that maybe that's where we're at.
Thank you very much, Donald. I think it's very nice words to conclude this session as well. Keeping in mind what's also Christina started her presentation with, that about nearly 80% of the people still charge at home and at work. And we may not forget this. Charging at home and at work is the first principle of having an EV. And then public charging point comes when you start to do the big travels. So thank you very much for all of you. Look forward to address our needs in the near future. Keep in touch. If the audience have some questions, we'll reach out to them. And we will have a short break now before we go to our next session at 11:30. Thank you for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.